Video. See if this live stream is working. Okay, cool. I think we're good. Time to drop some more knowledge. So this time, what I'm going to try to talk about a little bit is rates and how I sort of end up like negotiating stuff and whatnot. I'm still trying to find a way to use alerts. Oh, is there a way to like turn alerts off in general on iMessage? Anyway, cool. So rates are a funny conversation. So I work predominantly as a DP, get hired by other productions to go out and shoot stuff, but I also do some other things. And so I would say that there's pretty much like a standard for the most part of what things cost, at a certain tier in production. Excuse me again, gosh. So if you're like a gaffer or an AC or whatever else, like once you hit a certain point, a lot of those roles sort of stay the same. So like whether you're gaffing a like medium-sized commercial or a pretty big commercial, in my experience, you're still sort of in this biting range of like $500 to $1,000 a day. And so it's not like it super multiplies once you get out of that. Now, that can shift a little bit where maybe you're doing a smaller production, you don't have as much of a budget and whatever else, and you have to sort of make things work. And so sometimes people get asked to do stuff for less, but for the most part, I would say that's a pretty consistent range that I've run into in the tier of work that I've done. Now, DPs sort of fall into a much broader spectrum, but I'd say that it's pretty tied to the scope of work you're doing. And so let's say if we broaden DP into the concept of just someone who shoots stuff, it starts out with you getting asked to show up for $150, $200, $300 to like second shoot weddings, do whatever else, just come shoot something for someone. And then I would say that like a lower tier cinematographer type thing where let's say you're getting called to like shoot event coverage or whatever else, sort of in that range, you're probably in that like $400 to like $650 a day range. The other thing about shoots at that tier is, in my experience, that may or may not include gear. So like they might say, hey, can you come for $500, $600 a day and bring like a C100 and basic lenses? You know, that's a pretty average bid in my experience. And one thing I'll qualify this with is it's very different in different markets I've found. Because like London, stuff's super cheap, it seems like. But most of the US seems pretty similar. I think that there's some places that actually like bigger markets can go cheaper. So like Nashville, sometimes people do stuff for next to nothing. And like LA, people do stuff for next to nothing. But for the most part, this is a decent range, I think. So let's sort of put this on here. And there's definitely anomalies. But so let's say you're like PAing. You're probably going to make like $100 to $200 a day. And then like the anomaly is I've seen a few times that PAs got paid like $400 a day, which is great. You know, sometimes production takes care of people. So I would say that 400 is not a super likely thing for you to actually get, but it's possible. But let's even say like 100 to 250, like 150 to $200 is a pretty standard like PA rate in my experience. Gaffer, as a gaffer, you're probably, here, let me switch this real quick. As a gaffer, you're probably going to average, I would say like 650 to like 800 is probably like the tier. Like most often gaffers who are working on the kind of stuff I'm on, they're probably in that range. But realistically, as a gaffer, you can get anywhere from like 300 to 600 to like $1,000, let's say. I would say that 1,000 is pretty up there. Like I don't run into that much, but I'm sure it happens. And I'll also say that these numbers are mostly commercial, so like narrative stuff can definitely be lower. Like I can see a gaffer getting called to like do a short, and they'll be like, "We got $300 a day," you know. Whereas more of the commercial stuff's a little higher. Now let's say like camera operators. I did a job camera operating recently. And it was $850 a day for me and no gear. So that was sort of like a middle of the road, I would say higher end cam op type gig. Yeah, that was definitely more higher end, I think. So cam op, you can get anywhere from like, if it's super simple, you know, it might be $250. If it's middle of the road, I would say that you're probably right around that like 650 area again. And then if you get up there, you can sort of hit that like 900 or so dollar range. Grips, in my experience, grips will be anywhere from like 200 to say like 350 to 650 a day, depending on how good they are and how big a project it is again and all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in being a grip, that's probably sort of what you're looking at. Directors are really all over the place. I can't really offer too much insight into that, honestly, because like low-level directors, if you aren't like running the production, it's hard to make a lot of money. And then if you're a big director, you can make huge money. So that's all over the place. Directors are $0 to $1 million a project. And then DP, let's say that like if you're getting called to DP something and like it's any form of legit, there's, you know, more than 2 people on set, or even if there's not, there's like a decent camera, talking C300, FS7 or above, then in my opinion, like the low end of getting paid to be a DP is like $600 a day. And if you're getting asked to like DP something for like $300 a day, you can probably push back on that. And it sort of depends on the scope of the project. Some people, I know there are production companies that are sort of scuzzy, and like I've had people ask me to come out for like $400 a day. I'm like, nah, I'll pass. But if you need the work, I don't know, I'm not going to argue with you, but 600, and I would say that's sort of like that lower end, like super basic commercial. You're probably not super familiar with lighting, but maybe you can shoot like some decent natural light stuff, or, you know, just lower budget stuff. You're probably talking like $600 a day. Now, as you get into that sort of like middle tier, which I think is like where a lot of, my friends and I tend to reside, you're probably in this middle ground that fluctuates between like $900 to, we'll say $2,000. And so most of the guys sort of in that range are, I would say, pulling $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 days. Like that's most of that tier. But we'll say that if you're getting to be like a mid-tier cinematographer, you're DPing stuff that has a few people on set, you've got lights, whatever else, it's pretty standard in my experience for people to budget like $1,000 a day for a DP. Then when you get up to being a hotshot, you know, it goes all over the place, but there's guys who are getting $2,500 to $5,000 a day. And some of those are people that I know that if you're in the Facebook group, you might know, but you start getting into commercials and that's what they start budgeting. So the moral of the story with this for me is mostly talking about negotiating. And that comes down to knowing what you can offer and sort of what tier you're at as a person, and then what tier production's at, and then being able to line all those expectations up. Because sometimes, like, you're really good, production has money, production's still going to ask you to do it for next to nothing. But if you know, like, okay, like, I've talked to some of the other guys in my area, and this is, like, what this goes for, then I can sort of push for that. And in my experience, I've rarely had really bad conversations over negotiations about, like, rates and stuff. You know, I think it's something that people get a little squeamish about and are like, oh, I don't want to push back, you know, I don't want them to not hire me and whatever else, which I get. But really, like, there aren't that many like producers, production companies who if you're like, hey, can we do this? They're going to be like, F you, we're out of here. You know, for the most part, they're going to be willing to at least have that conversation. They might be like, no, we can't do that. But then it's also fine to be like, okay, well then I can't swing it, you know? And you should never feel like someone's twisting your arm to do something for next to nothing. And so people will respect you if you can sort of put your foot down sometimes. And you might still get asked to do stuff. Like I still get asked to do stuff sometimes that whether it's like sort of a personal project or a cool opportunity or whatever else, someone's like, hey, but usually I would say that for the most part, people get that and they understand that they're asking for like a favor or an opportunity for me or whatever else. And so they'll be like, hey, totally understand if you can't do this. This is a thing. And I might be like, that's awesome. Or I might be like, can't really pull that off. Can't justify that this week. But yeah, so I think there's sort of this swing that goes on. And so that's something that happens to me. I posted a while ago about a project that I got called about that was going to be a bunch of days, and they sort of wanted to get this bulk discount on days. And I really like put my foot down on it and was like, I can't do that for that. I'm sorry. Like, if I get 2 other real jobs being like full rate jobs, then this just doesn't make any sense to commit myself to all of that. So like, I don't mind giving you a discount if you're trying to book me for 20 days, but like, I can't go that far. We had our whole conversation, ended up working it out. And so the first 2 shoots with them, we did just like full rates, which for me right now, I've been doing $1,200 a day is my like commercial DP rate. I might creep that up soon to like 15 if I can. Start pushing for it. You know, there's always points in your career where like at one point it was like 600, and then I started creeping it up to like 800 and then 1,000, and then I jumped a few months ago from 1,000 to 1,200, and you know, just sort of continue that creep. But so I was getting $1,200 a day for me. Travel days are half days, and then Amira was $1,100 a day, but we weren't billing like travel days for it. So, and sort of the premise being that like if you were to fly into a town on Monday, shoot Tuesday, Wednesday, fly out Thursday, you could pick up the rental Monday, shoot Tuesday, Wednesday, or Monday, yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday, fly home Thursday. And they'd only charge you for the 2 days. So I'm not going to try to like, it's not worth me fighting with like how a rental house would do it. You know, if it's like a 3-month long thing that's like a lot of travel days, that might be a conversation. But, you know, when it's just like a travel day on each side, it's pretty standard that like the rental house wouldn't bill for that. And so I usually won't either. So the thing that became interesting was I sort of got approached with this idea of for some projects, they were like, well, we want you on this, this, and this. And I was like, cool, that sounds awesome. I'll lock those dates in. It was all good to go. And then I got sent over a contract that was like, hey, your rate is this. And it was half of what I had been paid for the other project. And so I sort of gave the producer an email and I was like, hey, what's up with this? And they were like, oh yeah, this is our like nonprofit rate. I was like, that's totally cool. I can't do that. So if you guys want me on the project, we have to negotiate this. If you don't have the money, that's totally fine. No harm, no foul. But that's sort of where I'm going to put my foot down on this. And so we ended up having sort of this slightly drawn out conversation, but it wasn't a bad conversation. You know, the fact that there's a certain degree of tension of 2 people trying to make something work doesn't mean that it's a bad conversation. And so I ended up making a deal, which was that, look, let's split the difference here. Their metric was sort of like another DP they had worked with and what he would charge for these things. And I was like, well, I charge a little more than this guy to begin with. So I can split the difference with you. And if my commercial rate's $1,200 and you want my nonprofit rate to be $600, I'll do it for $900. But the other deal was that travel days are still $600. So my travel days are half of my full rate. And then my shoot days were basically 3/4 of my full rate, which was sort of a situation that I was okay with. I was like, you know, whatever, makes everyone happy. I don't 100% agree with the concept of nonprofit rates, but I get it. So we sort of had this conversation, settled it out. This conversation was also being had right before I was supposed to fly out for this project. So that was sort of a communication hang up, but that's like a decent conversation to have. And so for someone in your perspective, you know, I think it's fine to be able to put your foot down and be able to say, hey, like, this is what I'm worth. This is what my time is worth. And I want to work with you guys, but like, I can't afford to be losing money. And like, if other work comes in at this rate, 'cause this is what I normally get paid, like that's going to screw me over. Then that's a fine conversation to have. So I would say that when negotiating, one thing that's important is knowing the scope of the project and knowing what they have to spend. You aren't necessarily always going to know the exact budget, but you can sort of get a sense of like, look, if this is what you're saying it is, you should have budgeted this. And that's something that just comes with time, but also sort of polling people in your area sometimes maybe, or in your tier, and being like, hey, like, what do you think I should charge for this? And sometimes it's fine to be transparent with people too. Like, there are definitely projects that I've gotten called about, and someone's been like, hey, we'd really love to have you shoot this thing. Like, what's your rate? And I know as they're saying this, like, you're not going to have the budget to pay me like my full commercial rates. And I'll say, well, you know, what do you have? And And that is another fine question to ask. One thing that does drive me crazy, though, is if something's like a commercial project, and I ask someone like, "Hey, I want you to shoot this thing. What's your rate?" And they're like, "Oh, I don't know. You tell me." If I'm asking you for a rate, you should be able to give it to me, in my opinion, because you should have that number in mind, or like a number in mind. And then if I say, "Oh, we can't do that. Can we do this?" You can totally be like, "Sure, I'll do it for that." But if you can't give me anything, that makes it difficult for me as like someone who's trying to run a production. So I think you should always have a rate ready. But like for me on certain projects, if I know they don't have money, then I can be like, okay, like where do we have to meet in the middle here, you know? And so that's totally a thing that can happen. And so like I was on another shoot where they wanted me to like come out and gaff basically. And I think they wanted to do like, I forget what it was. It was like $750 a day or something for a gaffer, which is fine. But I was like, okay, you know, but if it's this longer thing, like I can't go super cheap on travel days, because like I could be missing work those days, and so we negotiated that out, and sort of pushed for a couple $100 extra, and it was all Gucci at the end of the day. So I wanted to quickly pull up a few invoices, just to give you guys a sense of sort of like what some of this stuff looks like for me. None of it's necessarily super fascinating, but like let's say here's a recent project, which I don't know if you guys will be able to see and read this, but we'll do our best. Boom, 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 boom. I'm amazed no one has questions. So 2 days of me. I don't know why it says director/DP day. I think I messed this one up. It's just supposed to be DP day, but 2 days at $1,200 a day for me, $2,400. One travel day. I forget why. This might have been butted right up to another shoot, and so the other travel day went on the other shoot or something. I don't know. Anyway, one travel day, half of that, $600. 2 days of mirror rental at $1,100, and that's $5,200 total. So for me to show up, do that shoot, go home, I get paid $5,200 to bring my thing, and that's for a 2-day shoot with me and camera. Now that can fluctuate. Like if it's a pretty straightforward shoot, you know, nothing crazy, not super complicated pre-pro, like I don't like necessarily bill separately for like pre-production days for small shoots like that, because there's not that much that goes into that, you know. And so I'm sort of okay with like, okay, I'll probably have to hop on a call or two and like send a few emails, and it'll take like 2 hours total. I don't really like invoice separately for that, but some people do, and if it were like a project where it was a lot of time, I would totally consider it. Here's another one where booked our own travel and rental car and whatnot, and then got reimbursed for it. Last minute travel, so it was expensive. But 2 days of me, $2,400. 2 travel days, $1,200. We had a photographer. Mandy was doing photography, is $1,000. Gear, this was something where production needed a few small items with monitors and stuff that I was bringing, in a matte box, and so we just sort of agreed on a rate for like all that stuff together, and so I threw that in there, and then forwarded them receipts for car rental and flight, and that brings us to our grand total here of $79.95.32. And so that's for a 2-day shoot with a travel day on each side, then reimbursing travel. That's what my service cost looks like. And it's a decent little chunk of change, you know, considering there's a whole rest of production going on, and other people getting paid and other travel getting booked and all of that kind of stuff. It's not little money. What was the, so here's the thing. You might be looking at this and going like, either like, holy crap, that's a ton of money, or you might be looking at this and going like, that's not that much money. And it's always relative to who you're working with. But if you work consistently at these tiers of work, especially like for me, you know, with other options, like whether that's getting paid for an mirror rental, which I don't always, or whatever else it might be, you can get those good other revenue streams, and you can make solid money doing this for sure. Let me see real quick if I can pull this number up. and I'm not sharing any of this to like brag about it, honestly, because it's not worth bragging about in my opinion. I'm not like making mad bank and like top tier. I'm just sharing to help give everyone else a little bit of context, because when I was starting out, I was like, I don't know what anyone gets paid. I don't know what these budgets are. I don't know what's reasonable. So this sort of help give you a little bit of a measuring stick for figuring out, sort of where you want to be in that space. So let me pull this guy back up. Anyone have questions? It's an oddly dead live chat for having people watching this. You guys are usually much more talkative than this. So let's see, wave. And so the other thing I would say is that it totally fluctuates. So like let's take a screenshot of this chart. The only reason I'm doing screenshots is because I don't want to accidentally like start showing off people's email addresses and stuff who I shouldn't be. Why is my like screenshot button not working? Oh, because I'm missing the shift button. Sorry guys, I know how the computer works. Okay, let's pull this guy up. So this is sort of a roadmap for what my year has looked like. And so it totally has ebbs and flows, and it has really good months and it has really bad months. December, nothing happens. Apparently August, nothing happened. This isn't necessarily totally true, because this is actually only invoice stuff, and not everything is invoiced all the time. But yeah, so this is sort of the like fluctuation of invoicing. And some of that happens where like you invoice a bunch of jobs all in like a week for some reason, and then like you're working the whole time, but the invoicing spaced out. So this isn't the best metric for like work in general. But this is like sort of what all this looks like. And so if I look at my year overview and so the other tricky thing though is that like invoice total is gross income, and so like that includes, say we do a project that's $8,000, we spend $3,000 or $4,000, then I'm not making that like $8,000. I'm making my after cost thing. So this is before cost. This isn't the amount of money that I actually just like make pure profit by any stretch. But so far in 2017, I have billed for $104,772.79, which is a decent little chunk of change, I guess. It's not a bad, for being 7 months in, it's not bad. It's better than last year, that's for sure. So that's sort of what that number looks like for me. And it totally ebbs and flows though. I mean, it looks like if I'm looking at this little chart thing, my like average for 2017 is like probably like $9,000 a month. But there's a couple months, like there's 3 big anomaly months, one of which was $20,000, one was $35,000, and one was $16,000. And so those anomaly months are what sort of pump everything around. And some of that's direct to client stuff again, where like the $35,000 month, I probably made like $25,000, which is still a lot of money, but anyway. So that's sort of what those numbers can look like. So Robin asks, how do you go about finding jobs outside the area you live in? I don't really look for them so much as I just make myself available for them. And so like what that means for me is I present myself and try to make myself visible and accessible to people who would want to hire me. And I do try to sort of be intentional about like connecting with people, but I don't really like go out and be like, hey, hire me, or hey, if you guys, whatever. So like a lot of the work I'm doing is for people who at the end of the day found me through social media one way or another, and so I present myself on social media to people who would want to hire me in a way that makes me appealing to hire. And so like if I were mostly trying to do direct to client work, I would want to present myself to those potential clients in a way that shows me as valuable. Since most of what I do is DPing, most of what I'm doing is being intentional about presenting myself to production companies and directors and producers in a way that makes me look valuable to them. And then when they get a job, I want to be the first person on their mind. Not necessarily for every job either, but for specific kinds of jobs. And so I think that controlling sort of how you present yourself is a big factor in that. And that can be out of town, in town, sort of with whoever the people who you identify as people who could potentially hire you. You want them to know about you, and you want them to want to work with you. And so if I was like trying to grip or PA or whatever else, like I'd try to make friends with the people who I know are hiring those people, whether that's producer, a local production company. And then I would go and take the first opportunity I could to like get on set with them. And then I would just like bust my butt and try to be awesome. And then that's how you get called back. Like we had a guy come out to a shoot last like a week or two ago. And he absolutely crushed it. And at the end of the day, the producer said like, we're definitely going to hire this guy again. He came out just to help out, like just hang. He didn't get paid or anything by production. I ended up paying him because he was just like super helpful to me. But he made such an impression that he's definitely going to get more work out of that. And he's actually gaffing our next shoot together. And so like you got to get in front of those people and make a good impression. It can be an about our company type of video. I don't know that it's necessarily quite that formulaic and contained. Like it's not necessarily that I like do a video that's like, here's me as a DP and like how I'm talented and how you should hire me. It's more like even like my Fuji frames on Instagram affects people's thought of like the kind of images that I'm making. And then when they have something that like they want to accomplish a similar aesthetic, they're going to call the person who they've seen that aesthetic coming from. So it's getting yourselves in front of those people, being skilled enough to work on the kind of project where they're going to like be able to pay for travel, because you have to, have budgets that can afford for that kind of thing. But then, once you're at that tier, it's just making yourself appealing to, those kinds of people. Set up a contract for a business commercial job. I don't really, honestly, like the direct-to-client stuff that I have done with Valo and whatever else. We've never really done contracts. I don't really like contracts. I know that I'm an anomaly in that, but yeah, I'm not a huge contract guy. I've only done it like when other people really wanted it. And same thing with crewing stuff up. Like a lot of the work I've been doing recently, the production company will send me a contract for the DP work to be like, hey, here's the dates we have you locked in on, and here's the rate and whatever. But like, I don't ever really make contracts. And I think that most things that people end up using contracts for can be resolved with just good communication in general. And then you don't have all the like legalese going on and like precedent for each other trying to like hold each other accountable to this piece of paper. My goal is that I'm going to do the best I can for you. You're going to do the best you can for me. And we're going to, create something awesome together. So I'm not a really big contract guy. So that's sort of some of my thoughts on that. Anyone else have questions? We're at almost a half an hour, so I should probably cut this off. But I just sort of wanted to give you guys some insights into numbers and negotiation. If you have any questions, let me know. I can do like a part 2 on this. But yeah, that's sort of where I've been at. Thank you guys so much for your support. And let me know if there's anything else you want to see on here. If you missed it, I posted earlier today. I'm going to do another round of Patreon critiques. So if you have a website, project, anything else you've done that you want me to look at and give you my thoughts on, post it in there, and I'm going to pick someone who wins a Rode Video Micro. Ta-da! From that. So that's cool. I also just did another live video talking about getting out of low and no budget projects. That replay should be available. This replay should be available. I might do another video tonight. I might wait. I have to go like eat dinner and stuff. But yeah, so that's it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time.